Good morning. This is the last regular convocation of the semester, right, David? And, I know Harlem Globetrotters, but they had to use their convo skips by the end of the semester, right? Okay, so I see a lot of them are using them today, but that's my fault. Didn't we give them an extra one? We gave them an extra convo skip, Corey and Robert, because they turned out in such big numbers to vote, and so a lot of them are using it today, but don't take it personally. It has nothing to do with you guys. It's just the end of the semester, but we've got some very special guests here today. First, I want to mention there's an article that I tweeted out last night that really compliments you as a student body. It's from Virginia Business Magazine, and it's about how you as students have gone the extra mile to serve others and to fulfill the Christian mission of the school. I really think you'll enjoy it if you take time to read it. It's by Heather Hayes, a local reporter here who wrote for that magazine. And so if you get a chance, take a look at that. You'll be proud of yourselves. First of all, Steve Strang is here. He's the founder of Charisma Magazine. He's an award-winning journalist, entrepreneur, businessman, and author. His newest book is God and Donald Trump. Steve is Charisma Magazine, I've always heard, has a bigger circulation than Christianity Today. I believe that's still true. And he's just doing an incredible work in the Christian world in so many ways. Thank you for being here, Steve. And also, we have Corey Lewandowski. He's a political operative, a commentator for One America News Network, Fox News, CNN. He and I became good friends last year during the campaign because he was the former campaign manager for Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. He's co-author of the book, Let Trump Be Trump, because anybody that's ever been around him knows that if you don't let him be him, you're going to get kicked out. So I think that's a good title. David Bossie is also here. David and Corey have been on news shows all week, Fox and other networks, talking about their book. But David has served as president of Citizens United since 2001, as deputy campaign manager for Trump's 2016 campaign. He was ranked #2 in Politico's top 50 most influential people in American politics. He's co-author of the book I just mentioned, Let Trump Be Trump. David has produced 25 documentaries since 2004 and co-produced 6 feature-length films. And so we're going to please welcome all 3 of our guests to Liberty University, Steve, Corey, and David. We know you got exams coming out, so we'll try to get you out early today. All right. Robert, is this the second convo that you've done with Center for Law and Government? This is the second convocation. Robert heads the Center for Law and Government. He's former congressman from Southern Virginia, and he only stayed in, what, 4 years?
6 years.
6 years, and he got out. I wish they'd all get out after 6 years. But anyhow.
Term limits.
Where do you want me to sit?
Right here.
Okay.
Where do you want to sit?
He told me to sit here, so I guess right. All right. Well, I'll let you guys lead off and just tell us, Steve, start with you. Tell us what you've been doing with Charisma Magazine and what. Tell us about the new book and just anything you'd like to share.
Well, Charisma Magazine is a spiritual magazine, but we devoted our entire October issue to Donald Trump. And we published articles from Christian prophets, modern-day prophets, who predicted he'd win against all odds, and he did. And that led one thing to another until I wrote this book, because I thought it was important to talk about the spiritual aspect of what's going on, not just the politics.
Well, you supported Cruz first, right?
Boo.
That's right. I've had so many Christians come up to me and tell me recently, I supported Cruz. I thought you were crazy when you supported Trump, but you turned out to be right. And
you were
when they
right.
see things like Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch, and you see Trump recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, what many presidents have promised to do. many presidents have promised to do but never had the guts or the integrity to follow through. You know, you have to. Mike Evans, who is a big supporter on that issue, is calling Trump the modern day equivalent of King Cyrus from the Old Testament. You want to comment on that?
Well, I agree with that. In fact, for me, that was kind of what made me vote for Trump, because, you know, he's not the kind of person that evangelicals would normally look, you know, someone more like Mike Huckabee is more my speed. But a friend of mine said that he believed that God was raising him up like Cyrus. And the Bible says in Isaiah 45, I have called you even though you did not know me. And it was like, you know, the people in the Bible were not perfect at all, but yet God used them, and he used a pagan king from Persia to send his people back to Jerusalem.
And so many recent Republican leaders, presidents and otherwise, have made, like Jesus said, made clean the outside of the platter, but inside are ravenous wolves. And I keep going back to that passage, and I think it's
You're absolutely right.
And they seem like they're good, decent people, good family people, but when it comes down to, look how they acted when Trump won. I mean, they've been trying to sabotage him ever since, and they just don't act anything but Christian.
You know, the amazing thing is he has championed the values that you and I would, and most of these students would believe in, better than people that had better credentials, like George W. Bush, who was a good man. But he just didn't come through on a lot of stuff. But Trump is coming through again and again and again. And I believe that gradually the people who don't like him are going to come over.
So that's why I think when it comes to politics, Jesus separated. He said, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar, and to God. I always say that, I know. But you can't judge somebody according to how good they are and decide on who you're going to vote for based on that, because we're all sinners. And Jesus said, if you ever lusted after a woman in your heart, then you're just as guilty as the guy who's had adultery. And so they're all the same. You vote for the one who's going to vote the way you think is best for your country. And I think that's what evangelicals did.
You're absolutely right. And there's so much hypocrisy of where people who have things in their own past will point their finger at someone else.
The only difference is they never got caught.
That's right. But as Christians, we also believe in redemption. We believe that people can change. And in my book, I document that about 10 years ago, something happened in Donald Trump's life. He started cleaning up his act. He started watching Christian television. He started thinking about the future. And I believe that he's a very different kind of man than some of the bad stereotypes that we're familiar with.
I was the only one willing to go on TV and say that after the Access Hollywood videotape came out. But Corey, welcome to Liberty. Welcome back to Liberty. You were here with President Trump last year.
Mr. President, I was here, and I was here with what is now our President of the United States, and it's such an honor and privilege to be here. Thank you for having us.
Has the campus changed a little bit since you were here?
It's amazing. The growth from a year ago when I was here, you know, the dorm back behind us wasn't completed. What you have done at this school and across the country is just amazing, and thank you.
These guys get the credit. If it weren't for the students and their attitude, you and I were talking backstage about how you were at Harvard recently. Tell us about that.
You know, I grew up in a town called Lowell, Massachusetts, which is not a town of privilege. I'm a blue-collar guy who had the opportunity to be on an amazing ride with the most extraordinary candidate in the world. And Harvard University called me and said, would you come up and be one of our visiting fellows? And I went up there, and the difference between what President Falwell has done here and what they did at Harvard is night and day. It's amazing how you understand what the real America is like. And when you go to Cambridge, Massachusetts, they live in a fantasy world. They are so entitled up there. They think that everybody owes them, that they are the smartest, the greatest, the best. And what happened and what you guys have here is so different. And let me just give you one example. You know, about 5 years ago, they wouldn't let me slow my truck down in front of Cambridge, Massachusetts, because they hate everything that Trump stands for. They hate the fact that he's a populist, that he wants to make America great again, that he's not a globalist, that he wants to make sure that the promises he made on the campaign trail are fulfilled as a president. That's not what they want up there. They want rhetoric. They want things that make other countries great again. And it's so refreshing to come to a university where people care about their country again, and it's okay to say Merry Christmas. And, you know, I got to tell you about your president. I got to tell you, because this is the honest to God truth, and Jerry knows, the president knows I'm a truth teller. The day the Access Hollywood tape came out on Donald Trump, I made one phone call, the only one I made, because CNN, the president of CNN called me and he said, Corey, I need you to come on TV right away. And I called President Falwell. And I said, Jerry, I need to go on television in the next 3 minutes. What do you want me to say? Because every time, as the campaign manager to Donald Trump, I called the Falwells and the Falwell family, they showed up. They were there as a steadfast supporter of this president when nobody else was. And Jerry and Becky came out and they helped campaign, and they saw in Donald Trump before anybody else did what this country needed. And he said to me, and I repeated it verbatim, he said, my father always said, we're not electing a Sunday school teacher. We're electing the next president of the United States. And I went on television and I said that, and that hit home to so many people. Because what President Falwell just talked about is the hypocrisy of the left. All these people who make accusations against other candidates only to find out that their own house is not in order. And what we have finally seen is some of those things are coming back to haunt those very same people. And I am so blessed and so privileged to be here at Liberty University. Thank you, President Falwell, for the invitation.
Thank you, Corey. I did notice that the only time the president calls me to go on TV is when he's in real trouble. So,
True.
He says I'm a warrior. I don't know where he gets that from, but our students are the ones that deserve the credit for what's happened here at Liberty. It's them that makes Liberty a special place, and we thank you guys for that.
Thank you.
Randall Wallace, who is from Lynchburg, he'd made the movies Braveheart, Pearl Harbor, We Were Soldiers, Secretariat. He spoke at commencement a few years ago, and he went to his son's graduation at Duke the next day, and he said he couldn't believe the difference in the attitude of the students. He said the same thing. At Duke, it was, we're entitled, we're the elite, we deserve the best in life. He said at Liberty, it was all about what can we do to serve others, and I think that's what's going to make you guys much more successful when you get out of here and you get in the real world, because those are the attributes that really lead to true success. And I just have to believe that those guys at Duke and Harvard are going to be working for you guys one day.
That's the truth. Look, President Falwell is so right, and he's so smart, and I've had the privilege of going to many of the so-called Ivy League schools. I spoke at Stanford, I spoke at Oxford. It's the same sense of entitlement that Harvard had. And what you have here are servants' hearts. What you have here is something so very special that you don't have a sense of entitlement. And what you will achieve here because of your education at this institution and the values that you come out of here with are so much superior than all those entitled individuals at those Ivy League schools who think that the world owes them. That's because of the leadership that President Falwell and the rest of the university has here. So I am so thankful that you are here. And I have an 11-year-old daughter, and she said to me, she said, Daddy, I want to go to Harvard someday. I said, baby, you'll never go to Harvard, right? We don't care about those Ivy League freaks. It's never going to happen. I said, what you're going to do is you're going to go to the greatest school that I've ever known, which is Liberty University. And I was here. Someday, when my 11-year-old, who I love more than life, is going to apply for a school, I'm going to call President Falwell and say, baby, please let her in, because I love her. And she's going to sit in these very same seats that you do and get the faith and the love and the blessings that you guys have here every day, because without that, you cannot be successful. And that's what you get at this university, so thank you.
I agree. You know, Corey called me last January on a Saturday, or he had his people, I'm not sure who called, but at 11 o'clock in the morning, said, can you be in Iowa at 5 o'clock? And so we jumped on a plane. I said, you got to pay for the plane. The lawyer says Liberty can't pay for it. So they paid for the plane. And we were there, and we showed up for the rally, full auditorium like this. And I said, what am I here for? And they said, you're the moderator. I said, oh, okay. So it was just Trump and me went out on stage, and I asked the questions. Luckily, I'd been texting Sean Hannity. He gave me some ideas. But we went on the plane that night, and I think, I never told you this, Corey, I think I talked too much about liberty when I introduced him, because the next morning when we were in another city, and we're getting ready to do another rally, he said, Jerry, after this rally, I'm gonna send you out to Des Moines to do some interviews. And I said, I must have talked too much about liberty. But then we did the second rally, and I toned it down a little bit, and afterwards he was like, who the hell needs Trump? Jerry's the smartest guy I know. So that's what he said, so excuse my language. But he said, after that, after that, he said, I want you to do the rest of the rallies now. So I learned my lesson after that first one. I never told you that story, but anyhow, David, welcome to Liberty. And,
thank you for having me.
Yep. You and I have not gotten to know each other that well, but tell me a little bit about it. You were here a few weeks ago for...
I was just here down for Constitution Week about a month or so ago and enjoyed my time here. I actually came here the first time in 1987. When I was just a kid, I was in my early 20s. I was working for Senate Majority Leader Bob Dole when he was running for president, and came here. And that weekend we had Pat Robertson and with your dad, and it was an amazing experience. And I've been blessed to be back many times since. And I actually have a junior in high school, so we're going to need a little help next year ourselves. She's actually a tremendous student, much better than her dad. And we're going to be looking to send her down here. And we're blessed with 4 kids. We live right outside of Washington, D.C., and in Montgomery County, Maryland. And Maryland usually doesn't get that big a round of applause, I'll be honest with you. It's a fairly liberal state, but thank you. And so I had the distinct honor and privilege of being the deputy campaign manager. I came in with Steve Bannon and Kellyanne Conway at the end of the campaign in August and ran the general election. And then I was the deputy executive director for the presidential transition team. So I helped in my little way of building the cabinet and recommending a lot of the folks for jobs and trying to build out the White House. So it was a tremendous experience. I was there. I walked into the president's office in Trump Tower the night that the Billy Bush tape came out. And I believe the first phone call he made after he spoke to Governor Pence was to you. He was on the phone with you when I walked into the office. And so I know what a special person and a special relationship you have with the president. And it is, you've been a rock to him. And it has been a blessing to him, your relationship with him. So I want to say thank you for that, because you've seen him and helped him through a lot of issues over the years. And you can see his courage just this week with recognizing Jerusalem as the capital. And what he has done, he is the 13th president to say he would recognize Jerusalem, but he's the first president to actually do it. And so it's been an amazing week of leadership coming from the White House. So I've had a privilege of knowing the president a long time, and maybe we'll get a chance to visit about that. But thank you.
Robert, you got any questions?
Yeah. So, Dave, you've known among the 3 guests, you've known the president longer than anyone. You got to know him in 2010 through Steve Wynn, and ended up kind of being an advisor to him as he approached the 2016 election. And I guess my question is the message of nationalism, America first, was that sincere? Is that something, because a lot of people say, oh, well, Trump is just about making money for himself, about his brand. How sincere is he in that message? Has he been talking about that message from the beginning? And obviously it carried out into success.
You know, that's a great question. And if you look back throughout 20 or 30 years of videotape that's out there, videotape is what we used to use. And you watch Oprah Winfrey interviews, and from 20 years ago, you see this president talking about bad trade deals and what it takes for America to succeed economically around the world. And you see him talking about these blue collar issues. And we called him the blue-collar billionaire because he connected with people. And so this has been something that's been true to him for a long time. And you're right, I got to know President Trump, not politically. And that's one of the things in our book, Let Trump Be Trump, we try to talk about. We try to talk about the man and his incredible kindness and how generous he is to all those around him. I'm just going to share a personal story. I got a chance to know him. Steve Wynn is a friend of mine, is a famous Las Vegas casino magnate and a successful businessman, and another Marylander, I might add. And he was helping me raise money for Children's Hospital in Washington, D.C., where my son, not just at that hospital, but at many hospitals, had a series of 4 brain surgeries for a brain aneurysm and then 2 open heart surgeries. And he struggled for life as a baby. And I wanted to be able to help other children and other parents through raising money for Children's Hospital so that others could have what my son had, which is the best health care in the world. And it is through that Steve Wynn said, Dave, I'm going to introduce you to Donald Trump, who owns the property where you hold that charity event. He just bought it by coincidence. And so he introduces me to then Mr. Trump, and I go meet with him, and he is so kind. And in the first meeting, he gave so much and allowed me to become part of his family, really. And it was an amazing thing that he has befriended my children over the years and helped me raise hundreds of thousands of dollars for Children's Hospital.
Why do you think that the media doesn't give him more credit for that? Why doesn't he?
The mainstream media wants to build him into this character, right? This caricature of somebody that they want, which is somebody who, is a kind of a figure that people will dislike. And so I, through this book, and Corey and I, through Let Trump Be Trump, really try to connect people with the man. And it's the behind the scenes stories of the campaign. So, he does tear we say it, in the book, we say he tears our faces off, on the airplane, and we were looking to, with or without a parachute, we would have liked to got off the plane a few times. But we had an amazing experience with this man, and he is just so kind and generous. And it's one of the things that we wanted to, and I talk about my son's journey in the book.
Corey, talk about the media. I think it's safe to say he has an antagonistic relationship with the media. I don't think that has always been that way. He's been the master of the media. How much has Trump been able to take this anti-media sentiment that is shared, I think, by so many of his supporters and so many of Americans? How has he been able to turn that into an advantage? And can you talk a little bit about the tweets, and what that was like from January 15 for 18 months as sort of Trump established himself as the front runner?
Well, look, someday there'll be a book that comes out that says the tweets that were never published. Okay? It'll be the greatest book ever written, because if you think the ones that he's put out already are good, you should see the ones that we never put out. It's amazing what candidate Trump had the opportunity to do with the fake news. He held them accountable. For the first time in our lifetimes, we had a fighter who, through his social media activity, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, has 100+ million followers, and he can bypass the fake news. And just this week, not just during the campaign, where he fought back every time and said, hey, there's a beauty from NPR, you're a real beauty, give me a question, right? He did it all the time. But what he did and what he has done is he's called out the fake news. This week, we saw an ABC reporter give a false story about Donald Trump and General Flynn. And only through Donald Trump's sheer veracity of attacking the media did ABC recant that story and suspend that journalist. This week, we saw a story that Bob Mueller has subpoenaed Deutsche Bank records, 6 hours later, after Donald Trump said, that is not true, through his social media activities, did they recant the story. But never in our lifetime have we had such a fighter in the Oval Office. And what the American people saw, and many of you were here last year when candidate Trump was here, was a man who wakes up every day and fights for what he believes in. But I have to tell you one story because it's so important. It's probably one of the greatest things that's ever happened in my life. President Trump is elected, and he gets sworn in on January 20th, and he calls me. And he says, Corey? He says, Corey. I said, yes, sir. He says, you never come visit me. And this is February of this year, and he says, would you come see me in the Oval Office? I said, absolutely. And I'd never been to the Oval Office because I'm a poor kid from Lowell, Massachusetts. And I walk into the Oval Office, and there's a leader of our free world sitting behind the Resolute desk. And to his far right, my left, is the Vice President of the United States. And I stand at the precipice of the Oval, right outside. And he looks at me and he sees me, he says, get in here. And I walk in to those hallowed grounds, the Oval Office. And he says, my man, come here. And he stands up and he gives me a hug and he turns to the Vice President of the United States and he says, Mike, do you know who this is? And the Vice President says, yes, sir, that's Corey. And he says, Mike, do you know who this is? And the Vice President says, yes, sir, that's Corey Lewandowski. And he says, Mike, this is the guy who said you could be the Vice President of the United States. And I said, well, sir, 60 million people said that, but I'm with you. And Mike Pence, because I was the chairman of the Vice Presidential Selection Committee, stood up and he said, Corey, will you take my chair? And I said, Mr. Vice President, I cannot do that. And he said, would you do me a favor? I said, I'll do anything you ask, sir. He said, would you pray with me? As we sat in the Oval Office, our leaders asked for God's help and forgiveness as they lead this great country. And I have never been so humbled of anything in my life. And Mike Pence and Donald Trump are such great leaders. And Mike Pence sat there and we prayed together. The President of the United States, the Vice President of the United States, myself, and nobody else in the room. And then after the Vice President finished praying, because he was going to go represent our country at a speech, Trump hit him on the shoulder and said, get the hell out of here, which was the greatest. But I'll tell you, it's so amazing.
It's so uncanny because we experienced almost the same thing. We went up there in February, and we went in Vice President Pence's office first, and what struck me is he has an open Bible on his desk all the time. And he reads it every day, and he was so warm and welcoming and personable. Then we go into the president's office, and the president was the same way. He had a red button on his desk in a box. And I said, what's that for right there? And he said, oh, everybody thinks that's a nuclear button. He reached over and pushed it, and a butler came in and brought him a Dr. Pepper. And so, and my daughter.
Most important button in the office.
My daughter Caroline said, Mr. President, you look like you've lost weight. He said, yeah, they won't feed me anything here. He said, I don't know if I've lost weight or not, but there's no scale in the White House, so I don't know. And he said, I used to snack all day long, but he said, now they give me remember on the plane he ate 3 cheeseburgers and
yes, sir.
Large fries? Yeah. I remember on the plane, President, he was a campaign candidate then. He asked me what I thought of President Obama. I said, well, it just seems like he's trying to bring America to its knees. And he stopped and he said, Corey, he yelled back for you, Jerry thinks Obama wants to bring the country to its knees. I don't know if you remember that, but I'm getting off the subject. But anyway, but at the end of our meeting with Trump, after about 30 minutes, he said the same thing. He said, y'all get out of here, go on. But that's just the way he is. It just makes everybody feel like he's their best friend.
But Jerry, the fact that they pray in the Oval Office, they ask for God's blessing and God's forgiveness, should never be understated. That's the side of our leaders that the media doesn't want to show. That is the side where they ask for the strength of God to give them the ability to lead our great country into a path which it has not been led in for the 8 years of the previous administration. The media doesn't want to talk about that, but Donald Trump and Mike Pence are men of faith, and they have God in everything they do, and it is never reported how important that is for this administration.
The faith, that's right. Our faith in Christ is really what unites us across all political lines. You were talking about redemption earlier. I was with Pat Caddell a few weeks ago down in Mar-a-Lago. He said that Martin Luther King was asked back in the 60s, why are you a Southern Baptist? After the Southern Baptists have been for segregation and haven't been on your side. And he said, I am and I always will be because it's a redemptive religion. It really is what unites us all. And I think that's what the media tries to divide us, tries to divide blacks from whites, rich from poor, name it, just every category, women from men. And it's something, if we as Christians can get past that and love each other, love everybody, then I think then we'll see our country really change. And I just truly believe that. But Steve, tell us about your book.
Well, first let me say that Let Trump Be Trump is a great book. I'm about a third of the way through it, and some of the stories that you've heard today are in the book, and so you'll want to get it. Their book is really more a lift the hood and look under and see what's going on. Mine is more of an overview. And Hillary Clinton wrote a book called What Happened? And my book answers the question. And that is that God intervened in this election, in the direction that our country was going. There were millions of Christians praying, and God answered our prayers in a way we did not expect, with a person we didn't even necessarily like initially until we got to know him more. And I'm trying to say that God is sovereign. This is something, you talk about the mainstream media, they don't talk about God at all unless it has something to do with, right-wing politics. But God is sovereign no matter who's in the White House. He lifts people up. The Bible says that. And I believe that God put him in the White House. In fact, former Congressman Bob McEwen said this week, I was at a meeting and he got up and said, if you cannot see God's hand on Donald Trump, you are deaf, dumb, and blind. And I believe that.
Bob McEwen's spoken here several. You know Bob McEwen, the former, he's one of our favorite speakers here. But Robert?
I guess this is for both of you all, Corey and Dave. It's been said that Trumpism is bigger than Trump. And I wonder what you think about that. This president will be up for re-election in 2020. And you see what is happening to him in the approval ratings and those sorts of things. Remains to be seen what happens between now and then. But my question is after he's gone, whether he runs again and serves out a second term or not, does what his message, does that go beyond him? Is it bigger than he is?
I'm going to go quickly, and then maybe you can. Donald Trump was elected as a change agent. And I think that's going to continue to be that movement, the Trump movement, is that Washington, D.C. has been broken for a long time. And it doesn't work for the American people. And I think we can all see that. No matter what age you are, you can be just as frustrated as anybody else that Washington, D.C. is not working for us. And Donald Trump told the American people during the campaign that I am a change agent. I am going to go and fix the broken status quo. And I am going to kick in a couple of doors and I'm going to flip over a couple desks and I'm going to make the establishment uncomfortable. And we can see that that's the pushback that he gets around Washington, D.C. for the last 10 months. They're a little bit afraid of him and what he will do. And so I believe this tax reform package, which just passed the Senate last week, is really the first big legislative victory of the president's, but it's kind of the straw that might break the camel's back, that maybe with one big victory, the president is going to be able to succeed in very big ways over time. And I think that the Trumpism continues well after President Trump is gone.
Look, I talk about this, we talk about this a lot in the book, right? Let Trump be Trump. What he did during that election was unparalleled. The way he saw the pulse of the American people, the way he tapped into that, not just here at Convocation, which he came to, but across the country. People were turned out in droves. And in the book, we talk about how the mainstream media never gave him the credit. And I heard this all the time as the campaign manager. People would wait in line for 8 hours in a blizzard to get into a Donald Trump rally in Tingsboro, Massachusetts, and they'd say, those people aren't going to show up on the polls. These people aren't real. Donald Trump isn't going to be successful. Jeb Bush is a little rusty because he hadn't run for office in 8 years. Well, Donald Trump hadn't run for office in 70 years. He'd never been part of the system. And what we talk about in the book is how he completely disemboweled the Republican establishment, how he destroyed all of the geniuses by the sheer veracity of his schedule. 6, 7, 8 stops a day in 4 time zones. And what that did was it ignited people who had not been involved in politics for 30 years. You go to Michigan, you go to Pennsylvania, you go to Wisconsin, places where Republicans don't win anymore. And you know what they said? They said, we're tired of the lies in Washington. And what we write about in the book is exactly what Dave said. Washington has been so broken that Donald Trump saw it and said, I will fix it. And for the first time in my lifetime, and yours as well, we have a businessman in the Oval Office who is not stymied by 30 years of Washington, D.C. dogma of the way it's always been done. And one quick story is, we have this great trading partner, it's called Taiwan. Maybe you've heard of it, right? And the president of Taiwan, she calls up the White House. She calls Donald Trump in Trump Tower right after he's elected. And he's sitting at his beautiful desk on the 26th floor, and President Falwell knows it, and I've been there many, many times. And the woman from the front desk says, that's the president of Taiwan on line 1. And 19 other guys from Foggy Bottom, the State Department, say, sir, we do not recognize Taiwan. You cannot take that phone call. And he says, excuse me? It's the president of Taiwan. What do they want? He said, sir, she'd like to congratulate you on your election win. Sir, please do not take that phone call. We cannot have you speak to Taiwan. It will destroy our relationship with China. He goes, hello, bing, right? And because he doesn't care, right? Because we're putting America first now, and he's not beholden to those special interests in Washington. That's what we write about. He is the blue-collar billionaire. He's a man who funded his own campaign, and he doesn't care the way it used to be done because he wants to do what's right for America, and that's what the book's all about.
Well, and another example of that is when he was meeting with a group of evangelicals early last year, maybe late 2015, and they said, we like you, Mr. President, but we can't support you because of the Johnson Amendment. We're not allowed because of the IRS. We all had tax-exempt organizations. We can't endorse you. He said, what are you talking about? And they explained to him the Johnson Amendment that I guess Lyndon Johnson added to another bill in the 50s. And it basically took away the free speech rights of people like me and pastors. And he said, well, I'm going to get rid of that. And sure enough, he kept his promise. And it's another big thing he did for evangelicals is he gave pastors and heads of nonprofit organizations like this one the right to speak, to have political free speech. And you might have something to comment about that.
You know, this is significant because I've never even heard of a politician talking about the Johnson Amendment, yet it's very, when you're in the nonprofit world, you know about it. And isn't it interesting how fast that Donald Trump got it? You didn't have to draw him a picture. He figured it out real quick and said it's wrong. And he fixed it with executive actions, but he also says he's going to get legislation through, and I believe that he will, to fix it permanently. And this is just an example of the leadership that he is giving this country, which just confounds everybody. But it gets back to what I've said in my book, is that God had a plan, and he raised him up for such a time as this, and he's continuing to bless him.
Well, the Johnson Amendment was one of the first things he talked about when he came here last time. Did you want to add something?
No, other than 2 Corinthians. Other than 2 Corinthians.
2 Corinthians.
Well, actually, that's a lot of people say it that way.
And by the way, I don't know if John Luke Robertson's here, but his family influenced the president's thinking on the Johnson Amendment a lot. Phil Robertson, his grandfather, spent a lot of time in his ear about it, and it was I was there a lot when they were talking about it. It was always a wonderful thing to have that family around him.
Well, back to something you said, Corey, about career politicians. You know, I think the American people have figured those guys out, and they don't want them anymore. But the question is whether the Republican Party is going to get smart and stop running them against Democrats. In Virginia, they ran one against the Democrat, and they lost. And I think it's going to keep happening over and over. We need some more non-traditional candidates. How are we going to recruit people from the private sector to do what Robert Hurt did, come in, serve for 6 years, then get out of there?
Well, I could tell you, first of all, that's a great idea, Robert. get you off this campus maybe again one day. But look, I actually got my start in politics on a college campus in 1984, which makes me really old, I know. But I was there for Ronald Reagan's re-election campaign at the University of Maryland. And it was a tremendous, tremendous thing to cut my teeth and get interested in the conservative movement. And I hope that each of you will consider getting involved in your communities, getting involved. It doesn't have to be, in politics, but figure people out, think about it, ask questions. That's the most important thing you can do as young folks, and be active and engaged. And so, look, Corey, I'm just going to wrap up. But Corey and I talk about in our book the ferocity of the campaign and the schedule. But it was run by about it was 6 or 10 of us that were the core group, and the president was 70 or 71 when he was running, and he drove us into the ground. His physical stamina, his motor ran at an unbelievable speed, and it was fed by fast food. I don't know if any of you have seen the media explosion over his diet of McDonald's. We had 4 food groups on the plane, basically: McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, pizza, and Diet Coke. That basically was the fuel for the campaign. And we thought, look, we have a lot of really funny stuff in the book about whether it's us pressing the president's pants on the plane while he's still wearing them, which you had to be very careful, or our diets, or just how we would fill 5 or 6 stadiums a day, 10, 15, 20,000 people a day, 3 different time zones across the country, day in and day out. And Hillary Clinton was having trouble filling a high school cafeteria. And that was when we knew we had the finger on the pulse of the American people and what Election Day might behold, when we saw those types of things.
That's great advice, David. All you should take note. Get your careers established, do something outside politics, and then when you're ready, try to go in and serve for just a short time, then go back to what you're doing, because you'll have a better perspective for what's needed for the country than anybody who's spent their whole lives in politics. I believe that.
President Falwell, you're so right. Look, career politicians have destroyed our country. It was never meant to be a lifestyle. We just saw, Congressman Conyers resign in disgrace. He was elected in 1962 or something, right?
1965.
I mean, this is insane. This is not what it's supposed to be. Go out, have a productive career, create jobs, do something of value. Don't go to Washington and say, this is the best job I've ever had, because that's what happens. And they take these guys out of Washington in pine boxes because they leave when they're 97 years old, if they're lucky, right? All they want to do is be career politicians, and they've done nothing. And what the Donald Trump revolution has showed us is that when you create jobs and you create value and you create a business and you employ people, the American people respect that, and that's what they want in Washington. So go out and do something different than spend your life in politics.
That's exactly right. And one of my colleagues up in Washington, who is a true hero of the conservative movement, and a 25-year friend of mine, is Amy Paul. And I don't know if Maggie is in the audience. She's a sophomore here. Your mom is one of the greatest leaders of the conservative movement, and a tremendous patriot. And I don't know if you're here, but I'd love to say hi to you afterwards if possible.
Yeah, okay. Well, also Hannah Langford's a student here. Her dad, Senator James Langford, was in the ministry, and he ran for senator, won in Oklahoma.
A tremendous patriot.
My guess is he probably will go back to what he was doing before. But that's what we need, is more of that. But I just realized we're completely out of time, and I promised him we'd get him out early. I was having too much fun, sorry. But we, both of the books, Steve's and Dave's and Corey's, we're going to give a special deal for students, $5 a piece, or $6 a piece, or 2 for $10. Okay, I came up with that idea before Convo. But anyhow, it's just both books are great, and we hope
we're going to be here to sign them. I hope.
They're going to be here. They're going to be here to sign them on both sides, right? or maybe all over there. Anyhow, God bless. You're dismissed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.